can't read on the computer.
Great. With the quorum present, I would like to call this meeting of the Co-op Budget Committee to order at 6:30 p.m., or actually 6:35 p.m. This is a regular meeting of the Co-op Budget Committee, which normally occur on the fourth Thursday of each month. The agenda was posted more than 24 hours in advance of the meeting on the SAU41.org website, at the SAU office, at the middle school and the high school. I would like to introduce myself, Darlene Mann, and the Budget Committee members who are present for tonight's meeting, which include Cindy Van Conen, Tom Enright, Lauren Ridstrom, Raul Blanchet, and Matt McGuire. Dave Blinn has an excused absence for this evening, and Brian Rader will be arriving late. I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce Superintendent Andy Corey and B.A. Kelly Seeley, who are also in attendance this evening. If you could all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, get back to the agenda. Looking at the agenda and asking for any agenda adjustments for the evening. Seeing none, we'll move on to the appointment of a process observer, who for May is Dave, who's not here tonight, so Tom, that would be you. We'll move down a name on the list. I just realized I opened my draft agenda, so I did change the order. So next on the agenda, we have approval of minutes. So these would be from our April meeting. I sent out the revised minutes with Raul's track changes, and Matt followed up with the final revision because, as he pointed out, some of the wording for the individual legislative initiatives that were being discussed, we used exact wording of those initiatives and didn't want to adjust those. So Matt's copy that followed the final agenda is the agenda that we would be moving for approval this evening. Okay. With that being said, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of our April meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the
by Raul, seconded by Tom. Any other additional comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the April minutes? 2, 3, 4. Opposed?
No.
Abstentions. So Cindy and Lauren abstaining. Thank you. We can move on to public input. I see a member of the public. I'm not sure if you're here to listen or provide input, but if you have input to provide, now would be an opportunity to do so.
I have nothing right now.
Okay, well, great. Thank you for coming. We can move on then. I always like this part of the meeting because even though we started late, we're ahead. So it doesn't happen often. So what I did from the change from the draft to the final agenda was just to kind of reorder those general business items in a way that I think kind of just flowed a little bit better. We're going to start with the project status, which kind of moves right into the school board update. Those two kind of piggyback on each other a little bit. And then we can talk about the financial update and some reports I asked Kelly to put together regarding grants and food services. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Bob Thompson. He was kind enough to give a tour of the facilities and some of the changes that are being considered for tech ed and for robotics. And Cindy and I took that tour before last week's board meeting, and he was kind enough to be available this evening. And a few of the budget committee members were able to tour the building a little bit. So I just want to acknowledge and thank him for taking the time out to do that. So moving on then to project status, the things that we were looking for under this item were updates on the turf field and the robotics initiative that was approved at the March meeting. There were some questions that came up last month that we thought are better addressed with your presence to kind of address the current status and some of the follow-up questions that we had. So I really appreciate you being here this evening to do that.
No
give us
problem.
Those updates.
If it's okay with the chair, typically I also give kind of an overview of FY21.
Yeah, that would be
So
great.
in my notes, I just started that, and then I'll jump into the turf field, and then I'll jump into the robotics.
Okay.
And happily take any questions.
Okay, great.
when we look at FY '21, we're starting that process in July. We meet with our building principals and our maintenance supervisors. One of the big items we're looking at that was discussed a little bit towards the end of last year during the budget season, and then a little bit at the board level, which will be coming back to the school board in August, is a multi-year tech plan for Hollis Brookline High School. We did a similar plan at the middle school over the last 3 years, and we have completed that rollout from the infrastructure supporting machines to the machines. One of the things that we're reviewing is, many of you may know about House Bill 1612, which is based on data security and websites and access, which was passed into law last season. It has required substantial manpower hours and things to bring that up to speed. I want to thank Kelly, Gina, Rich Raymond, and Carol Tyler, who works at the high school. They have done the brunt of that. And to give you the extent of it, it required us basically taking down any educational website that we used and doing a complete background check of their privacy standards and all that before our teachers were allowed to access that. So if you went to our site now, you would see by grade level every single approved site that our teachers are allowed to use. So there was that component. There's a component around getting your infrastructure tested. It's required under the law where you have to have a company come in and actually tell you about your strengths and weaknesses of your network so you can do security upgrades and make your network stronger under the goal of keeping the students' data as secure and safe as possible. But when we look at 1612, it also makes us have to go back and reflect on BYOD, because one of the biggest problems is if I bring in my own machine from home and connect it to the school's network, there's potential for viruses and a number of other things that might be there. So that's why we're looking at BYOD. At the same time, we may be rolling out a new tech plan, which again would involve Chromebooks by departments like we did at the middle school. So it's not a one-to-one, because I don't think there's 100% need for a child to have a device in front of them all day. So this would be designed more from an access from the instructional point of view of the teacher. So we'll bring you more information on that in August. We're looking also at gaining spaces for parking at the high school again, and that's becoming an issue. The one thing we don't have, which may be in progress with the town, we are in discussions back and forth, and I'd make you aware that Brian Bumpus, our cooperative athletic director, has also taken over the town supervision through the rec department. So there's great coordination now of fields and resources. And we're looking at some way either between the town and the school of tennis courts. We don't have any tennis courts. We used to play many years ago at Camp Tibia in Brookline. For a variety of reasons that no longer worked out. To give you an example, our boys tennis team played and won their semifinal match today at Manchester West High School. So they had to travel, and they'll be playing at Bedford for the finals. Again, I'm not saying this would be something in next year's budget, but this is something we need to examine over the next few years working with the town. The Hollis Police Chief and I met. We're also looking at, if you remember the high school, we have one entrance in and out, and it's one main entrance. We, through the process of looking at the turf field, also became aware of what I'll call right-of-ways and access that we currently have rights to. So the chief and I are looking at some ways to go across to what I'll call, if you know where our practice football field is, it's the one on the top of the hill, and potentially exiting out to that right away. And again, that's in a study phase, but I wanted you to be aware of that. The other thing that I just want you to be aware of, we're also concerned again about our long-term substitute line in the budget, because we have some staff members who will be expanding their families, and that seems to be a growing trend in the SAU right now, so that again, those coverages for long-term absence can really, they cost us to add another person. But I don't think there are any major surprises that we're aware of in the budget. We continue to monitor the capital improvement plan. I think that has been very effective. I will tell you that we will start to monitor what will be the FY20 budget shortly, and we're going to look at that budget and kind of probably come back and have a discussion. One of the items that we had put in the budget was, what was the, well, we put into the maintenance trust a couple things at the end, the day tanks and things like that.
Oh, right.
Okay? We will look to see if the operating budget can handle those expenses, because I think one of the goals I'd like to do is limit the use of the maintenance trust, because we do know we have roofs coming up. So if we could do that through operating, we will. And the reason I suggest that is we will have some teacher turnover that was beyond the retirements. So there'll be potential differentials in savings in those accounts. So that's why that operating budget might give us a little flexibility there. Amy and Bob have been working closely. Bob will be working with Amy to present the FY21 budget to you in the coming months. I think he is quickly catching up to speed, and we're excited about that transition as we move forward. And obviously, Amy continues to contribute just a wealth of knowledge. You know, we are investigating a couple other potential programs that will, not necessarily just in the co-op, but help us deliver services in district in a cost-effective way. So, again, once we get through July, I'll come back in August. I'll give you an update on the tech plan at the high school and kind of give you that a second overview of where I think this budget is heading, you know, and go from there. Moving over to the turf field. I didn't make copies because I didn't think you'd want to read it, but I wanted to let you know we are out to bid, and bids for the turf field are due back tomorrow. The project manual is 214 pages.
That's it?
What?
That's it?
No, that's just the project manual.
Okay.
The supplementary conditions are probably another 50 pages, and then each company gets the complete package of all the infrastructure. We had 4 companies show up for the pre-bid meeting, so we're excited about that. All 4 have submitted questions during the process, so we're hoping all 4 will actually submit a bid tomorrow. Bid opening is at 2 o'clock. If we have a really good day, my goal is to get them all scanned in and send them off, and if I do that, I will CC Darlene and she can forward them on, because at 2 o'clock they're public knowledge, so there's no issue there. I want to publicly thank both the Planning Board and the Conservation Committee. We went to both those groups in approximately March. At the Planning Board, there was one request that, if possible, could we drain to the north and not to the west, because they were concerned that the drainage, snow melting and all that, if we went west, would go towards Beaver Brook. So the engineers made a change. It's the only change that was made, and we just ran the pipe to the north instead of to the west. So it's all going to come down and eventually end up in our own swamp, which means it's all going to eventually go back to our grass fields anyways. So long-term, it wasn't a bad switch at all. There are no outstanding issues with the Planning Board. We went to the Conservation Committee. The concern there was just around snow melt and where we're going to plow, because again, if there was salt content, all of those things, with Beaver Brook being our neighbor, we were able to address all of those. In the alteration of terrain permit that we've already received to start the work as soon as we get through the bids. The only requirement that was anything major, if we were going to move the snow, we had to get a specific type of snow blower, I'll call it, just so that we could comply with the salt requirements, which was, we don't expect to plow it at all. Everything I hear, it will melt very quickly and naturally, so I don't think that will be an issue. The other piece that came up at the Conservation Committee was just the cleanliness, because if you're going to have folks up there at larger events, just the normal trash. I would commend Brian Bumpus. He became aware of this, and we kind of, as you know, we've worked very hard to get away from door-to-door selling of calendars and everything for fundraising. The boosters have really taken a more larger-term fundraisers. So, looking for community service projects for our teams to do, we just kicked off about 2 weeks ago a track team, which is probably about somewhere around 80 kids, spent the entire day just cleaning property up and down Main Street everywhere. They worked with the Conservation Committee, and that's something we'll be adding on a regular basis, because I think it really instills a lot about what this town is about as far as the conservation and the value we place in land. So that was very nice. We are awaiting final word on one DES, and that's the Department of Environmental Science at the state level regarding the wetlands permit. I've talked to Teagan Bond and Gove, G-O-V-E, Environmental. They did all the study, and they say it's in process. They were the ones that recommended going out to bid because they don't see any concerns at this time. All other issues with the field are ready to go. I think what will happen is we have scheduled a special meeting next Wednesday night for the co-op board. We're going to have an awful lot of information. I won't guarantee that we'll make a decision that night, but we will be able to get through all the bids, look at all the bids, and will set us up very nicely for our June meeting. As you know, between the lawsuits and some other bumps in the roads, we're behind, but that's okay because we're not depending on that field to start the year. We can play every single athletic event, whether that field's open or not, so it's not like we have this absolute, we won't be able to do something. And at this point, my thought process is let's take our time and get it right rather than rush, because we're already about 8 weeks, about 2 months. I hope to maybe in March or April be clearing trees, and that just didn't come to reality. The nice part from my point of view is because the children will be out of school, I don't have as much worries about contractors and people coming on site. We won't necessarily have to do, if we were in the fall, I'd probably do a criminal background check and all of those things. Where we're out for the summer and there's really no one at the high school, we'll be able to really move great guns, and we won't have to worry about sharing parking space because there's a lot of heavy equipment that's going to come in. So in one way, it might be a blessing that we're slightly behind. I just wanted to give you an update. The Boosters organization had pledged $20,000 to bleachers. They hope to increase that pledge in the very near future. They've had a very good fundraising year, and talking with their president, I expect that to increase. We still have the confirmed pledge with HB Elevates for $150,000 that is not designated to anything, so that is still there. And as we go through this process, we'll update you if and when we decide to utilize those funds. Some of you might know Jarrell Smith. He lives in Brookline. He's a parent in the district. Once we actually break ground, Jarrell will be working kind of hand in hand with me because we have other interests, but a lot of people have been waiting for us to break ground. So we're excited about that, and we'll be looking for what I'll call both targeted donations, where you're giving to something specific, either the bleachers or something like that, or untargeted donations, which would be up to the SAU to spend to offset the cost of the fields, and as we move forward to offset the cost of the lease, which is still one of our goals. In terms of the robotics, I had passed out a sheet. Lauren and Raul, Cindy and had all been able to take the tour again tonight. So I just wanted to touch base with you on this. As you know, the road is approved $98,000 at the March meeting. And what we wanted to do is provide you an overview of what we're looking at, and then I'd be happy to take any questions for that. The first thing I'd start with is, when I look at the project that we're going to propose, and we've started to propose by giving the school board the same drawing you're seeing, yours is slightly updated than the school board's was, and the curriculum that I gave you an overview of, we're really going to satisfy a demand probably for the next 3 years. Now, that works out really nice because, if you know from our enrollment projections, we're expecting an increase. So if that increase results, there'll be a need for more space at the high school. So it would be a bigger project than we currently just proposed. Or we might have to look at the space we just proposed as regular classrooms. I don't know. But that's one of the pieces that we would need to look at. In terms of this plan, I'd like to start with rules 103 and 104. 103 is the present robotics room. We are proposing, first of all, that return to a science room. We're doing that because then the teachers in 103 and 104 will be very close to each other, to be side by side. We are seeing at this point, are expecting potential turnover in science. So by having an experienced teacher and a new teacher together, there are a lot of curriculum advantages. The two smaller rooms are their storage area that was designed for chemicals and everything in science. 103 has your safety shower already in it, whereas the other science room we're presently using does not. If I can jump over to the space that says Robotics Clean. Robotics Clean is presently a science room that we're proposing to move to 103. So our tables and the equipment and much of the cabinetry on the wall is simply going to move over. And then that will become the Robotics Clean room. The reason we're looking at that is because if you look at the in the Robotics Clean room, you'll see the 3 words, a roll-up door. What we discovered when we were doing our walkthroughs, at some point, there was a door between those 2 rooms, those 2 spaces. So we were proposing opening that back up, whether it's a roll-up door for space or an open door, really won't matter. But that will give us our clean room and our dirty shop side by side. Now, the dirty shop is also the space that will be utilized by middle school students in tech eds in grades 7 and 8 all day long. And that's where the brunt of the money that the voters approved would be spent for equipment upgrades. When I was walking down the hallway with Lauren asked me if the machines are the automatic shut off. You know, you put your hand on it and they automatically shut off. The machines in that room are not. So this will give us an opportunity to make some significant safety upgrades as well as some enhancements. The robotics group has already been out securing equipment donations. So they have a minimum, right? That'd be the word, Katie?
Yes.
A minimum of 3 3D printers that will be donated. And we would use, again, the significant portions of the money for those roll-up doors to bring 103 back up to full tier for a science lab, and then to replace equipment. You'll notice very lightly there's a dotted line that separates robotic dirty from the wood shop. There we're looking at some sort of movable fencing or one of those slide walls so that it can be utilized all day long by our wood shop children and then at night by our robotics space. You may or may not be aware we have a retirement for wood shop. We've interviewed 2 individuals. We have offered the position, and they are both very good at sharing space. And they know they're coming into an environment that is shared space. And in talking to both of them, they have no problems. Both have either a construction background or a robotics background, and be more than willing to train kids on machines and add that kind of as a safety piece. Room 105, which is a tech ed room, there are no changes there. What we'll probably do there is just add a couple computers, because one of the kind of future visions, maybe not this September, but in the next couple of years, is to do more CAD programming, so that the computer would then be directing a laser printer or a laser cutter, whichever one we would purchase, and make the cuts that way. But we would like to keep a combination for the middle school of that hands-on tactical wood shop piece, and then a future expansion into what I'll call more Project Lead the Way, which is more along the lines of modern manufacturing. The robotic storage, that has been very much an underutilized closet. And one of the things that we have discussed repeatedly is the ability to for robotics, to have a couple spaces where when they reach closing for that night, they can just quickly move things away and not have to worry about it being in the same format. So when you look at that storage room, you know, again, we're not fully along where we are with the discussion, but we're looking at the ability to roll cots in that have everything on it, and then when they come in at night, they're simply rolling those cots back out and starting and not If you remember from your tour tonight, it's a very condensed space, and most nights they start by moving a bunch of stuff into the hallway, so they have enough working space. From a timeline standpoint, I would be going back to the school board in June and asking them, hopefully with your support, to take action to move forward with the funding that was approved by the voters. And then working robotics, the first thing we would do is move everything out and put it into some sort of storage container. We would then work on room 103, because that's for students in the fall. When we completed 103, we'd begin on the work on the robotics clean and dirty. We have a little concern, just because if you know anything about the construction market right now, it's going all guns, and getting people is not easy. We hope, because we have a lot of business with a lot of people, that we can convince them to make us a priority, because in their lean years, we're still here doing our projects. So we're hoping that moves forward. I want to, Katie is here. If you don't know Katie Hallett, first of all, I'll congratulate her as a mom. Her son Cam was the one who was honored with the Dean Kamen Award. It's called the Dean's List. I have got to know Cam on multiple levels in my time here, and he is truly a talented and gifted young man who is going to do exceptional things. And Katie and her group have been working diligently with the SAU office from, working on fundraising, what can we get for equipment, assisting with discussions around design. And we have two representatives who have been on the facilities committee since we started the STEM project, who remain on, that are both Josh Roby, who's the director of robotics right now, I'll call him that, and Ken St. Hilaire, who's a longtime parent and a member of FIRST. So I think from a plan purpose, what I like is we're kind of double dipping. We're going to be able to provide much better service to our middle school 7th and 8th graders, and we're going to be able to enhance an already outstanding robotics program through the same pool of money. There is a design component to this. We have already had a community member step forward and provide us with $5,000 to cover the architectural work, so that's above the $98,000, so that we can make sure that these doors and everything that we need to do is up to code. And he is ready to go as soon as we're ready to go. And I'd like to thank the architect and the donor. Let's see. I also wanted to mention that we had worked for about a year with BAE. In approximately February, March, BAE provided us with a $15,000 donation that was utilized for robotics, because that was their request and their specific. So we were able to provide them with some modern day laptops. They were using, I would say, more than outdated equipment, and still doing an exceptional job. In the teachers' conference room that robotics shares with us, we use it as a conference room during the day. They use it for their team meetings at night. We would install some, I would call it charging stations and holding places for their robotics, so that they would be able to come in, they'd just be sat there, they'd be all charged during the day. Right now, they're currently stored in one of the science equipment closets, but that doesn't always mean they're charged, and that doesn't always mean they're ready, because they are teenagers and they do forget sometimes. I also selfishly like it because everything is in the back corner of the building. And we would look at if you go back to the dirty shop, you'll see the double doors to the outside. We would make that what I would call the robotics main entrance and exit. There is 2 bathrooms down in that end of the facility that we would work with to, again, keep them there, because safety and security is also part of this. So I think we went from a vote on the floor to about 6 weeks of planning, and I think we have a really solid plan that, again, I hope you support. 85% of the voters asked to look at this. I think when I can pretty much guarantee you that I would not be asking for a STEM space in the next 3 years, what I'd be asking for is a close watch of enrollment, and that enrollment would be tied to potentially needing more space at the high school. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Just to give you the overall dollars right now, if the boosters does what I expect them to do, we've raised $210,000 since HB Elevates has been in effect, and we hope to continue that trend. And again, I don't want to speak on behalf of Katie, but I think she could echo that we both believe that there are people out there waiting to help us take this to the next level.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're kind of, and Katie would work with me on the robotics side, and Jarrell Smith would work with me on the field side.
You just confused me.
Sure.
The boosters and the 210, this is for both projects?
The boosters' contribution to the field, and the donate.
Yeah.
Right. And then the money that was donated, again, I'm just giving you what came in through Hollis HB Elevates, and then plus the boosters.
And the sum of those two numbers is 210.
Correct.
Okay, but
Okay.
they are separate, they're serving separate purposes.
Correct. Right. So 20.
Okay, I'm sorry.
20,000 went to robotics. 40,000 has been pledged to the bleachers for the field. Well, 20, and I believe they're going to double that. That's what I was told, so I hope they are. And then 150 has been pledged to the field with no stipulations on that.
I see.
Okay, maybe we'll work backwards since we're on
There was,
robot.
my recollection was the planning board meeting, one of the abutters thought he had a right of way across the property. And
The abutter and I met starting in January of 2018. There is absolutely an old right-of-way back when it was cornfields. That situation, and the abutter and I have been working with the school board, and I believe before we open ground, it'll be resolved, but I just don't have the final end answer for you tonight.
Is that going to be documented in writing and notarized and recorded?
Correct, yes. It would be done through our attorneys, through a deed, through all of
Right.
that, because it also kind of lends into that other discussion of accessing the other right-of-way for potential egress. So as I had to educate myself more on what New Hampshire right-of-ways meant, I learned more about it, and I realized there was a potential benefit for us as well.
So the right-of-way, I just want to make sure I'm thinking of the correct field. It's not our current football field, it's that practice field, if you're looking at the school to the
It's-
left.
Yes, if you went
Like there's
to
field
lacrosse,
hockey and lacrosse, and then
yes,
that
and
other
then up the
field.
hill, that takes you to a right-of-way there. And then if you go way back, which was in the deed, if you came off of that, and I'm gonna say took a left down our property, which borderlines Mr. McLaughlin's property,
Mm-hmm.
there's a right-of-way back out for both of us to Beaver Brook. Because
Okay.
when it was farms, it was actually for wagons.
So is the right-of-way on that field with the same owner as the other right-of-way, or is it a different?
It's the owners along the right-of-way that comes out to Main Street, so the one the furthest over. There are a variety of us who share that,
Okay,
okay? And share responsibility for maintaining it, which we also learned,
okay.
okay? But we also learned that we then, because we have a right-of-way, could access that in what I'll say an emergency situation. So that would require us to do some work, but not, in the grand scheme of things, every school in New Hampshire is looking for a second means of egress. So it's a very popular topic with our attorney, and it wasn't something he was surprised we were looking into.
So you're just looking at an emergency egress and not a everyday egress?
Correct. The only time it would be open is if the police chief or the superintendent said it could be opened.
I see.
And that would mean, let's just say a simple thing, we had a bad accident right as you come over the bridge to down near the baseball fields. That would close that whole place. And right now, we could potentially get cars out via Love Lane, but that would be a very tricky thing, and we looked at that as well. We're still looking at the Love Lane access. But we're talking specifically an emergency situation where the police chief is saying, we gotta get these 300 cars out of here. This is how we're doing it.
So
Okay.
is there, I'm still a little confused, is there a possibility that this supposed right-of-way that exists from the abutter somehow negatively impacts the field? Or is it in two different locations, or?
It's two different right-of-ways in two different locations, and the field issue is being resolved.
But is it still a potential problem?
No,
Or- Okay,
no, not according to the last time I spoke to the attorney.
okay.
0% risk.
I don't like that.
I know, you'd like it lower than that.
Are there any other questions regarding the field? I did speak with Tom Solon, or had some email correspondence with Tom Solon and Barbara King, because I mentioned at the last meeting we would invite them to attend. And Tom pretty much, provided input kind of to the, Andy actually added on to what Tom addressed to me, which was about the $150,000 in pledges and things like that. But that there really had been, no other activity that he had been aware of. So that's why HB Elevates isn't present.
So I
this
guess my
evening.
question is, how would the assignment of that 150,000 be done? Who would make that decision?
Well,
When, is there a timeline for making that decision?
Well, timeline, no, not yet. School board makes the decision. Because the way HB Elevates works is the money comes into HB Elevates, and the school board has to accept it.
Okay,
And the reason why HB Elevates has just been kind of slowed is we have the potential turf field project here. We had the robotics issue that was passed. If you weren't aware, Hollis passed that we're looking at the SAU building in the barn. So they passed the money for a feasibility study. So there are 3 separate architects and things that are going on. HB 1612, the safety and security, has just been overwhelming. And I will say, from a budget committee standpoint, this had no cost according to the state. Okay? So just to give you an example, I couldn't put a dollar amount on it, but I asked some people who used outside consultants. One of the districts I spoke to spent $40,000 to do this. We've done it mostly with our own manpower and our own expertise, and I feel very blessed to have the people I spoke about earlier, because they have that skill set. It's been tremendous. So then you may recall, we had $250,000 that we secured through security grants across the SAU. So we put in $130,000 of new classroom doors at HPS, again, taking our 1950s building up to modern day standards. We just put in a new secure entryway at CSDA, upgraded cameras at other buildings, and did more with monitors. So most buildings now, the secretary sitting at the desk has one monitor that shows her basically the whole property as she sits there. So we've invested a lot of time. So the reality is that running budgets, developing budgets, and doing other things, I really will get out and hopefully fundraise, but it's just been a difficult couple months. And the thing is that people are out there that want to help. That's the thing. So it's not like I'm out there, twisting you around. Most people are calling me and say, hey, I heard about this. What do you think? And I'm like, well, I got to wait. I really want to break ground. And I think that's the other thing. There are a couple people who just kind of want to wait and see it break ground.
So I know you said this already, but that there, Elevates has 2 funds. It's got a fund for the track and a fund for the STEM.
Elevate can take money for anything. So if you said to me tomorrow you wanted to donate $250,000 to do the whole tech plan for the high school, I could take that from you tomorrow.
But just to clarify it for me, so we've got X amount of dollars in Elevate.
Right.
And some of it's been designated for the track? Or is it all
You mean
just in a
field.
fund? It's all undesignated?
No, $150,000 has been designated to the athletic field.
Okay, and of that 150,
Right.
is some of that for the bleachers, or is?
No, that's undesignated, just
Undesignated.
150, we will decide how to use that as a school board. The boosters, the athletic fundraising arm, has already pledged $20,000 to bleachers, and like I said, they hope to double that pledge.
Okay, so going back to the legislative meeting, did we make any commitment to the voters that this 150, or whatever the amount was going to be applied to reducing the debt?
What we said to the voters, and what was voted on, I think if you went back and looked in a minute, we talked about 15% coming through donations. And I think we're gonna be on target with that, but I don't even know what the price is until tomorrow.
15% to reduce the debt, or just to buy other things?
15% that was going to be used to offset the $1.6 million.
Okay, all right.
So I won't say debt, but I mean, like, scoreboard is part of that was included in it, so somebody could donate a scoreboard. But that was part, the scoreboard was part of the 1.6 million. The bleachers were not part of it.
Yeah.
The lights were not part of it. So it's very clear what was in and included and what wasn't.
So the items that were excluded are, say, the lights, the bleachers, a press/coach's box.
Correct, yep.
A concession stand.
Correct.
Restroom facilities,
Right.
all excluded.
Correct.
Fencing,
Included.
included.
Right. So if you, I think that's a great way, and thank you for saying that, because if you think of everything inside the fence was included. So
Okay.
uprights, lines, everything inside that fence is included. Everything outside that fence, we were gonna look for donations.
Okay.
So, I know we gotta get off the subject, but so we issued the bonds,
Mhm.
so we have the cash in-house,
Yes, we do.
and so we're paying debt, we're paying the interest on the bonds.
Yes, we are.
And so the funds that are in-house are invested?
They're getting a nominal fee because we didn't know when we would be able to start. So to put those into an investment that would have gotten us maybe a higher yield, we didn't know when we were gonna be moving forward and need access to those funds. So about 4 months at a minimal rate.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And again, we expected it to be started 2 months ago.
Yeah, so it's basically sitting in a checking account. Or-
Right,
yeah.
a nominal account, yep.
All right, okay, thank you.
So do the plans, I know we've been talking field, but does it also include like the track around it too? You know how most
If there's
towns
no-
have the,
No, we didn't put a track because our track is,
I know we have the separate one over
Right.
there, but I just wasn't sure whether,
no, there's really no need I'll use my expertise as a former track coach, we have an outstanding track. Once we move the majority of our gains off that field, that'll become an exceptional field, and we can also utilize it for throwing the javelin, and it will also work very, very well for sub-varsity sports. Yeah.
Was lighting an issue at the planning board level or at any level, or do we have a clear path to lighting?
We have a clear path to lighting. The only thing they asked about, which Teagan Bond answered, was just how much of how far the light would extend,
Yeah,
and what.
the glow.
Yes, with the new lighting.
We cannot look for the stars,
We don't want
50
the whole
feet
center
from
of
the,
town
right,
lit
right.
up.
Right. No, I guess with the new lighting, what's been, evolving all the time is it's very focused, so it will light the field, but my understanding, if you're X number of feet behind the fence, you're gonna be
Okay,
not well
good.
lit.
That's good. So lighting, we've
No,
got
they-
clear
they-
path.
They
Right.
barely approached lighting this year,
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, after killing
Well, it
us.
was sounding, the sound was one of the concerns.
yeah, they did ask
Yeah,
about
they asked
sound,
for
and
the
there's
PA system.
no decibel ordinance for the town, and we were happy to go to whatever decibel was asked, but you have to be able to provide that to the vendor, and there's no level. But we did assure the abutters that spoke that, we're gonna have great respect for closing early. We all wanna go home.
So even though it isn't officially recorded that we're gonna spend 15% to reduce the principal, it is your intent to do that? And because
and I
of the
think the-
meeting minutes,
Yep,
some level of recording has already taken place.
correct. And the
So-
other piece is, I don't know what the dollar amount is gonna come in at yet. And like I said, if I get the package scanned, I'll include Darlene and she can send them out to everybody.
So I guess there is some moral obligation to go ahead and pursue that, no
Absolutely,
matter what other priorities may come along.
correct,
Okay,
And this is 15% of what, of the bond,
yes.
yeah.
total bond?
Right.
Okay, all right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
May I ask Cindy a question?
Absolutely.
So when this was passed, there was no plan, and there were a lot of people who were very skeptical of this, including the school board.
Are we moving on to robotics?
Robotics, okay.
Are we moving to robotics?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, I just
didn't-
want to make sure.
Sorry, I meant to, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
The wood, so the wood, the
wood
wood
chip.
shop program, and does the school board now seem satisfied that the wood shop program will continue unhindered or in robust health? Or-
Andy brought you, we're looking at the curriculum
Yeah,
for that, and the intent right now is yes, that we'll keep, the wood shop as part of the project. But, as everything else evolves, it depends on who we hire
because
and what their skill is.
It looks like the wood shop is constricted quite a bit here. I mean, I'm looking at, they got a table saw, well, that's terrific. But a lot of the other equipment is outside of the wood shop area, in the robotics area. I don't know how that plays.
Well,
The door's gonna be
if I can
open,
answer that,
yeah.
Tom.
Yeah.
The intent is that the wood shop and robotics space is available to the instructor during the day. He can use it. There are certain machines that we don't believe that middle school students should be using, so those
Yeah.
will kind of be off limits.
Yeah,
And then during the evening, the reverse would be true. As much as we're saying if it's a wood shop, if robotics needs to come in and use a table saw, we're trying to get away from this model where somebody owns a space.
yeah,
And we
okay.
start to just utilize spaces for the best interest of students.
So
So-
I would
so-
like to, actually, I would just like to clarify as well that this plan is specifically for 1073, the high school team. So the middle school robotics team would not be utilizing this space. And based on the tour that Bob, the overview Bob gave us, they have a smaller space actually right outside here. So the middle school team is not, and I understand it's a different program and
Right.
different requirements, different ways the robots are constructed and a
Right.
different focus at
Right.
that age. But just to be clear,
Yep.
this is not the middle school robotics space. It's high school robotics specifically.
so my question on that is, given that we've solved the issue of capacity in terms of number of students and how much space, there has to be a very disciplined arrangement
Mhm.
so that the robotics people don't leave a mess
Mhm.
at night, and then when in the morning the woodshop kids come around, all of a sudden they find tools and equipment everywhere.
Right.
So how are you gonna police
Well,
to ensure that there is always a smooth transition and at night they pick up everything to get it ready for the morning?
Well, first of all, in the history of the robotics team using the middle school, their room is always put back to order. Now, there might be too much stuff in there because they don't have enough space.
Right.
But it's always put back to order. When I talked to both of the teachers that we interviewed, the two finalists for the position, they both referred back to there are certain construction standards of a way a shop should be left.
Right.
And they plan to communicate those with robotics because it's an industry expectation, and these kids are heading into manufacturing and high-tech jobs, so there'll be that expectation. And I think because they're kids, I think the start will have some bumps.
Right.
And there'll be some issues. But I think very quickly, those 7th and 8th graders are going to become your high school robotics, and the teacher will already have trained them on what's expected, and that issue will go away. But at the same time, if you've ever raised a child, you know their bedroom doesn't always look the way you wanted it to. So we'll deal with those issues as they come up.
So Andy, you had
Okay, thank you.
mentioned that this plan fits within a 3-year plan. Can you just kind of expand on that a little bit?
What I had said to people that were here earlier, one of the things that we're watching, and I think whether it's the Hollis Budget Committee or the Co-op Budget Committee or the Brookline Finance Committee, is enrollment. Right now, the projections show our elementary schools growing. We are very much dependent on the economy. And if the economy were to trend in a different direction, I'm not sure we would continue to grow as much. I don't think we'd see the amount of housing going up and all of those things. But right now, we have a number of indications from housing permits being pulled, potential developments in the town, that I do think enrollment's going to grow. This buys us 3 years to watch that enrollment trend, because if it's correct, our high school won't be big enough, and we will have to do some addition. It'll probably be slightly larger than what we propose now, But, you know, if we went to 9:30, we'd have a problem. And at the same time that's going on, Gina is preparing where we're going from a curriculum standpoint with our STEM. As you may know, we now have STEM from K to 6. We have robotics teams at each of the elementary schools. We have an intentional design push at different grade levels to introduce different STEM pieces. We actually were not expecting a tech ed retirement this year, so we honestly thought we had a little more time. But because this got moved forward because of the retirement, we're accelerating the curriculum, and we're looking at a couple projects that are gonna give you a choice. So if Brian, Tom, and Lauren were in the class together, both our instructors have commented Brian might choose a traditional wood project using traditional equipment. Tom might do a combination of the two, and Lauren's skills might be on the tech side, so he's going over to CAD, designing there, and then his is being designed by either the 3D printer or the laser cutter. So that's what I mean by the vision, and this will align with it. And I think, you know, we were going to need to pay for new equipment in there at some point. So this money that came in primarily is going to upgrade equipment that would have had to be paid for at some point. So it's just gonna happen a little sooner than we had maybe planned for.
So with that kind of 3-year kind of foresight and looking at that, if we were to see enrollment, you know, an increase in enrollment at the high school is preceded by more than likely an increase in enrollment in the middle school. So how much latitude in enrollment do you have to be able to utilize the space and then utilize the space in this repurposed manner? Like how much would enrollment have to change here for us to then need to say, oh, we really need to take that space back and not have it accessible for robotics? And then if, would you expect that to happen, you know, within the 3-year period or sometime thereafter?
I don't think it would happen in the 3-year period, unless there was an explosion within the town. But we did deal with that because, just so you know, we actually had to add an extra kindergarten section in Hollis last school year. So that's a significant trend, and it was interesting. Many of those children are the oldest in their families. So we're seeing that whole cycle starting again. I have made it clear to robotics that they would lose the clean room if we needed that for day space, or they would have to share the clean room if we needed that for day space. And then if enrollment continued to morph, we would have to look at maybe some of your arts and things going on to a cart. Foreign language is another one that has, in past years, been on carts. I'm not saying it's ideal, but at the same time, that would give us the classrooms, because basically, let's say, I can't imagine it, but maybe we'd have to add another team. That'd be about 100 students, so you need to find 4 rooms. So this would have to be taken as one of them.
I guess that's what I was looking for, like that number. At what point is it a new team or something like that? That many
you know,
students?
80 to 100 is going to get you to a new team. You know, up to that, we'll just have to deal with class sizes.
But that's a huge number for
Yeah,
7th
that's a
and
big
8th
thing.
grade.
I agree. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that's,
Yeah.
so that's why I'm not saying they're going to lose
Very
this room.
unlikely that it would happen.
Right, but what I
Would have
want,
to be that.
and I think robotics would agree, I've made it perfectly clear that if that needs to be taken for day space, we would have to figure out a new solution for them.
Congratulations.
Only if
You turned that into something pretty good.
I really think it is good, and again, I think our job, and when I say our job, I mean Kelly, Gina, Amy, and I, because we meet once a week, we believe this is gonna be good for kids. And that's why I'm gonna advocate at the June meeting for the board to support it, because it's good for both 7:30 to 2:30, and then robotics at night. And again, it's not a result of the success of robotics. We've always believed in the program. This year, they had an exceptional year, and I think they'll have another exceptional year next year, because I know a lot of the kids. But it's more about, this is just an amazing talent. As I joked at the last meeting, I don't have it. Don't let me near the tech room, that's dangerous, you know? My wife dials the phone and calls all the contractors, that's the way it works. But to have these skills and to have a vision and to be able to see things is amazing. You know, to me, it's no different of why I want to have, you know, a tremendous music program, a tremendous theater guild, a tremendous athletic program, because if every kid fits in and belongs, they're more likely to graduate, they're more likely to go on and be successful, and that success means that we have great community members wherever they choose to live.
Well, I think that's, and we all support, obviously, all the students, and I think one of the biggest concerns from some budget committee members is kind of the slippery slope aspect of how this was passed at March meeting. And so I think where our again, the overarching concern of some committee members is that, you know, we spend a significant amount of time working on our budgets through a process that begins before it even comes to us. There are many initiatives that we don't hear about or get taken off the table and things like that, and things that are as important, if not more so, affect more students and things like that. And, you know, through the generosity of the legislative body at that meeting, this initiative was passed without supporting details of the plan, without going through our process, which is not how our $20 million budget is passed. It goes through a lot of discussion, a lot of review, a lot of details are shared. I mean, for, you know, several $1 million that went into the STEM project, there were detailed plans, project overviews, public forums, 2 years of a committee, things like that, and that still didn't get passed. And I think people, you know, look at this and say, well, it's a small amount of money compared to the larger project that was put forward. But from a budget perspective, it's a large amount of money compared to the initiatives we took off the table, the staffing we didn't support. You know, I mean, there's probably a list of 25, 30, 50 things. We didn't support some technology upgrades. We didn't, you know, there were lots of things that came out of the budget. And similarly, I think there's, and again, while it was a citizen's petition, it's certainly able to be put forward, and there's convincing that needs to be done to get the vote. The concern is that we've now started down this path where there can be many initiatives that get put forward in a similar vein, and it really kind of upends our budgeting process. So,
just to speak to a couple points about that, I think, first of all, I don't view this as kind of what I'll call inside guidance, because it wasn't part of our budget. So like looking at FY21, I'm just, you know, I understand that piece. And
oh yes, it comes right off the top.
But I agree with that. But the second piece, and I think this is, you know, another area where I express my gratitude to this group and the school board is, A, I think the citizens know that we wouldn't support this expenditure unless there was a plan. B, the citizens know that I'm going to come to the budget committee and I'm going to have to sell a plan. And they respect that, and that's why I think you folks are elected. And then the school board holds me and themselves accountable to those same standards. And I think, although I support it this time, I'm not saying just because it was passed on the floor, I would support it. You know, there are cases where, you know, we have had things in budgets and maybe enrollment didn't go the way we thought or whatever. I would freeze that money because I think there's an obligation. We told the people what we're going to spend money on. And if all of a sudden we don't need that teacher, rather than just take that money, we need to freeze it. And then if this body and the school board can agree to spend it on a worthy cause for something to offset something, that's a different story. So I think part of the reason why this passed, in my humble opinion, is the relationship between the school board, the budget committee, and the SAU. I knew full well this group was not going to just hand me a check. But I also knew that if I came and I talked about students and why this was good for students and what this could do for two different groups, that I'm hoping you can support that expenditure. And have the same discussion coming up on the 15th with the school board, you know? But I'm not a fan because I do know the hours we put in. But at the same time, I think this passed because we had done 2 years' worth of work. And I think we're going to give them something that works, like I said, for at least the next 3 years.
Any other questions?
I just think that you know, everyone should be aware that there's people on the school board that have the same concern. And you know, Andy knows he has a tough meeting coming up in June.
I just want to say that I totally support the project, and I totally support the efforts you're going through to make sure it succeeds. And I support the comments that Darlene is making. So I would tend to try to see how much savings we can have from the rest of the budget. For example, I took a preliminary look at the actuals versus budget, and maybe there's some room to get some of that 98K back
Right.
and give it back to the taxpayers.
Right, well, I think what you'll see tonight, and when Kelly does the revenue and expense, I think we're at, right now projecting to return a little over 70,000 to the taxpayers.
Right.
And that's my goal every year. You know, I'm gonna come to you in a year where I need the money and say I need it, and if there's ways we can save, we're gonna save and return it to the taxpayers. So, I would accept that challenge, Raul, and see if we can do it, and I maybe have a little more confidence because of some teacher turnover money, you know, health insurance and things like that. But at the same time, when I know I'm gonna have 3 maternities, I know I'm already starting in the hole on those line items too.
So try your best to give some money back to the taxpayers.
I'm gonna give you 70 this year and hope to do the same again next year.
Good.
How's that? It's in the minutes.
Okay, any other questions regarding robotics or athletics? I just had a couple of things on the plan, some of the initiatives for FY '21. With regard to the capital improvement plan, I'm not sure where road repair to our existing entry to the school stands. Based on the road analysis that the town has put together, they very clearly stipulated that the roadways that go to our schools, including the primary and up to the high school, are clearly the responsibility of the school district. And I'm not sure how or when we're going to be considering repair to the road leading into the high school. So I think kind of as we're talking egress and things like that, that will be, I'm sure, come with a hefty price tag. So I'd like to kind of, I'm still kind of, I still don't understand why it's not a town responsibility. Maybe we can bring that up to the town. I'm not sure. I just don't understand why it falls.
It's a private way.
It is technically a
It's
private way. Okay,
way,
well then that explains
and,
that, so.
And we plow it the same, and
Yeah.
we'll do some patching and repair. Sometimes with teenage drivers, it's not bad to have some bumps.
Maybe it's not a bad thing, that's
You know, they
true.
work just as good as speed bumps, and
Yeah.
they don't cost you anything. But we will get that taken care of, because I actually had a couple people call me in the last week, because
Yeah.
a couple of them have gotten pretty bad.
Can I make a comment on that topic? I'm concerned that potentially the heavy equipment that's going to be brought in to work on the turf might do some damage to the roads and to the back end of the parking lot.
Yep.
What is the plan to address that?
Well, from my pre-meeting with the bidders, they weren't concerned that they would do any damage. And the storage of their vehicles is actually going to happen off the hot top.
Okay.
So, and within the first couple weeks, the intent is to be pushed in enough that everything is off the hot top and just cars.
Okay.
So on the parking, you were talking about also parking spaces, so are you considering paving those 2 dirt lots?
Well, we have one dirt lot, we did one.
Well, yeah, well, by 2, I meant the one that's up closer to the
teacher.
building, like the teacher lot.
Yes.
And then the other side.
Yeah, looking at both of those, I'm looking at some way, my concern about paving the dirt lot as you're going in on the left is, there's no sidewalk on that side of the road. And again, I wish kids paid better attention, they don't. So I'd rather go up to the teacher's lot, pave in there,
Yeah.
And gain, because I believe we can gain some spaces there. And then with the field will come, I'm gonna call it a gravel lot with about 30 spaces
Oh.
that we'll have access to during the day. And then we'll have our required handicap parking right up next to the field. So probably a total of 35 spaces that we'll gain.
Okay. Great. Okay, so when we were talking about are there any other questions, or? Okay. When we brought up the topics of the field and the robotics project, the concerns of the Budget Committee were, did we feel like we needed to take positions on first for the field, how our preference toward how donations are, the undesignated, the donations designated to the field but undesignated to a specific component of the field needed to be spent. So are we all satisfied with the 15% discussion that it would go toward reducing the debt, or do we feel as a board we need a specific position directing our preference or request for how that money is used?
I'm
If
sorry,
the-
go ahead.
If the 15% was part of the discussion at the public meeting, or at the legislative meeting, and everybody agrees to it, I think we're good.
Okay. Well,
I was gonna say, if we're able to succeed and have 15% paid toward principal, that could be the model for future major investments.
Right, no.
I mean, if you can show that indeed the plan worked and it was executed properly and indeed we accomplished what we set out to do,
Right.
so that could be used as a precedent for future
Right. No,
STEM major improvement to the,
No,
to
I
the
totally
building,
agree with
you
you
know.
on that. I mean, I think part of the success we're having is because the Hollis Primary School project went very well. I think we'll build credibility, and we want to do that again with this project, because again, there'll be more that needs to be done, in gaining trust and having people have faith in you is what you're after.
okay. So then, moving on to robotics, is there any further discussion on, that we want to have as a committee, or is the committee willing to make a recommendation? I guess we could take the approach of all motions being in the positive to support the proposal brought forward. Is there more information you'd like to hear? As was mentioned, the school board would be making a decision at their June meeting, and the project would move forward as a result of whatever that decision is. So, is
I
there?
make a positive motion to,
I second.
Wait, I need the motion first.
You know, you have the details, he has the
right,
details.
right. Matt's good, he's got it covered.
Okay, so the motion would be to support
Support the robotics
the-
plan like
the-
as presented.
as presented, the
tonight.
proposal, as presented. Recognizing there are some, modifications that might take place. Okay, it's seconded by Raul. Discussion
Question.
or
Are there
questions?
any, yes, I know. Are there any concerns about this plan that you haven't mentioned?
When I look at 103, Brian, I'm aware that I need a new floor in there. And I'm aware that I have gas in the room, but I have to reconnect it. So anything would be something that I couldn't say to you tonight, but what I would say is, just picture redoing your own kitchen. There's the potential that when you open up something else will be there.
Yep.
But I think from the standpoint of the plan and the vision, I'm very comfortable with it, and we will watch the dollars very closely.
Based on looking at the room earlier tonight, I think there was normal wear and tear for the kind of mission you're accomplishing there.
I'm sorry I
that's-
missed that.
So that's how I would describe it.
There's a lot in that room. Any other comments?
Yeah, I like the plan that was presented. I mean, it's like there's been a lot of work you guys put into it to come up with something that makes it work well.
Yeah.
I just have to say,
Yeah, no, say it because I'm with you.
I really am reluctant to support the proposal. I think there's good thought and effort behind it. I support robotics and everything it does for our students. My son will probably be on the team one day, and my husband, the more he's learning about it, I'm sure he'll be very involved as well. However, I think as you can see from some of the comments I made earlier, and I appreciate everything you do to manage the budget. You have, seen us through freezes and manage many, many different issues to be able to return money to the taxpayer on an annual basis. But I think I'm just still very concerned about the method, and I think what I would prefer is to see the plan go through our normal budget process in the fall and see how this falls into the plan for what we're projecting for our next budget cycle. Again, it's just a personal opinion. I'd like to see it more cleanly go through our process. I understand the mood of the legislative body, and I understand the will. But I might have to, maybe I'll be the only one who doesn't support it. But again, it is not for lack of supporting the team, the effort, and the attention that gets put into the plan. It's really more about the process itself for me individually.
Well said.
So the options then would be, walk me through the options if we don't, if the budget committee doesn't support it, the school board doesn't support it, then what happens?
If neither supported it, then I would assume the $98,000 does not get spent,
The money
and it would
would
get
encumbered,
returned.
so that way it can't be spent, and then it would be returned to the taxpayers.
Well, the legislative body, though, appropriated it for a purpose.
Correct, correct.
So then the elected officials have chosen not to acknowledge the legislative body's
Authority,
vote.
right. And I struggle with that, because as much as we have a process, it's designed for those individuals that show up on that night. And I guess one of the things that I love about town meeting is you have to show up to have a voice. So people showed up, they,
No, I understand that, but I guess my question, maybe Tom, if, I mean, the legislative body, in effect, ordered us to execute some plan that involved $98,000. So if we, particularly the school board, not so much the budget committee, but if the school board says we're not gonna spend it, what does that mean?
the attorneys answered it, just so you have the official view, it gets encumbered and returned to the taxpayers.
And that's okay to do that?
It's okay from a legal standpoint. I'm not sure if that is when the body tells you to do something. I kind of respect I'm just using my
Well,
personal
Is there a
opinion.
possibility of
They
suing?
told us to spend 20-some odd $million, but we don't spend every penny of it. We.
I would love to.
You're not allowed.
He tries.
No, but the point is, and again, it's a bottom line budget, and it can be spent, while we have, thoughtful way, and we presented the detail, and we have the details of how we anticipate it being spent, it does allow for the latitude to make, because of day-to-day decision-making and,
disagreeing,
all of
yeah.
those things, so.
And then just from a purely legal standpoint, the decision to spend it is totally in the school board's hands.
Right, so if the budget committee were to make a recommendation not to, it may or may not have any impact on a decision of the school board. And there are some cases where if we were to use money from a retained fund balance and things like that, budget committee approval is required. This isn't one of those cases. This is really just, us providing some perspective on it, but it really, has no, if we were not to approve it, it would not in any way prevent the school board from approving it.
But just, my hope would be that this body could approve it because the relationship we've established over the last 5 years of working collaboratively to arrive at a number, because I think, I can tell you I will be recommending to the school board to move forward because in my position, I view it as the advocate of the kids who don't necessarily get to talk. And I think this is good for kids, and I would advocate for that, even to the point of, if $98,000 solved it, could I find $98,000 in the budget, kind of to Raoul's point. So I'll make you that promise. I'll do everything to, work our way to the best number possible for the taxpayer, because I think that's what they want us to do. But I really would hope that you could support it, even though it didn't go through the correct process.
What if, once you actually get all the plans and numbers, say it comes out to be 110? How will the difference be made up? Or will that's it, 98 is it? And
98 is it.
I just want to make sure that that's the cap.
So you're gonna make it work with the 98?
Or something won't get done.
98 or less.
Something isn't bought or whatever, and then that would become something that would be in a future budget. But I don't have the authority to spend over $98,000 on this space.
I think this is a very tough choice, tough decision, because we're not looking at a proposal that doesn't have any value, that doesn't have a lot of other positives. So we're trying to balance the process, the precedent you're set, what stops other projects, or maybe a continuation of this one next year. So that forces us to really think about maybe reestablishing or making some new process official, so that this doesn't happen again. But at the same time, there are a lot of positives.
There's no way to prevent that. There's no way
Can I
to
just
prevent
offer
that.
one thing? If the legislative body had told us to cut $300,000 and passed that, we would be doing that. So I don't really see the difference, because the legislative body gets to decide, So, and if people walk up to the microphone, and there were moves again this year to cut X, and it wasn't gonna hurt, it wasn't gonna do this, and the legislative body makes that decision. They made this decision. We could be standing there in a tough budget year, and they could say, Andy, budget committee, you gotta go back and cut $250,000. And that wouldn't have been part of the process either, but we'd be doing it.
Yeah, I don't agree with that analysis, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay,
So what I was going to finish saying was that I think there's a lot of value in this endeavor, and I think there's a lot of tangible gains to be made in terms of the education, the experience. I'm very impressed by the performance of the team at the Nationals. I think, so in my mind, the positive clearly outweighs the negative, so I'm going to vote for it.
My feeling is that ultimately, as elected officials, we are responsible to the legislative body. The legislative body gives us the directions. We work within those directions. We make recommendations to them. But ultimately, the decisions are made by the legislative body, and we have a responsibility to make a good effort to implement those decisions. However, we do have the legal, there's a slight bar there, in that we have also a legal responsibility to, because they make decisions at a high level, there can be situations where we could say, well, if they had known this level of detail that's come along since then, they wouldn't have made the decision that they did then. Like if they allocated $95,000 and it's really going to cost $400,000 to do it, they probably would. We can reasonably assume they probably wouldn't have done that and say we need to go back to the voters if that were the case. But short of something that's harmful to the school district, I do think that we have a moral obligation to make reasonable efforts to abide by the direction that's provided by the legislative body. I think that is part of our responsibility here, is to make a good effort, a faith effort to do that, unless there's really something that's significant that gives us reason not to do that. Regardless of how we feel about the wisdom of their decisions.
that was a nice way to finish. Yeah, I like that.
We're getting better at this.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with this one.
I'm having a lot of trouble with it.
But I guess my conclusion is I think I'll surprise myself and vote to support it. the legislative body is what it is. The people that show up, and the people that don't show up. And that's the way it's always been. And I think I was told to spend this $98,000. So I'm gonna support it, but I don't like it, but I'm gonna support it.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the proposal, of the motion to support the proposal for the robotics program, the 98,000? All those opposed? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 2. Again, I think with reluctance, because I sincerely appreciate the effort, as I said, that you do put into managing the budget, and I'm sure you will manage toward, using available funds and things like that. And I appreciate everything that you, Kelly, and your teams do to do exactly that.
And the support was with reluctance too.
Yeah.
I get it. My appreciation is noted,
So,
even for the two that had to vote against it, because I respect that opinion greatly too.
Yeah, that was a difficult vote.
I know.
Because I wanted to
Yeah.
vote for it.
I know you did, yeah, yeah. Great.
Okay. So next we have school board updates. Cindy, I'm not sure.
I don't think I have anything left.
No, as well, I want to say, too, that,
109
thank you,
pages.
Andy, that
Thank you.
Thanks,
Uh,
Anthony.
the link to the agenda included this overview of the technology and engineering program, and the minutes include some of the presentation that Gina discussed at their last meeting, so I think
On
it's.
the curriculum.
Yes, on the curriculum. It included, again, the minutes included the comments. I'm pointing because of the robotics team, and
There was a lot of public input.
there was a lot of public input
At the last
and
board
follow-up discussion, so that was all included in all of those minutes. So, and that was a large board package. That was like over 100-page
Oh,
board
Yes,
we get
package.
them,
109.
we get
Yeah.
them often.
It was a big one. So, and you can have another meeting next week. How
A
fantastic.
lot of it was the governance plan, though. A
Y-
lot
oh,
of that
that's
was
true.
Carol's
Mistake to hit
presentation.
print.
Oh. Oh, my gosh.
I have a quick question. Are
Mm-hmm.
you familiar with these items in these?
She went over most of it with us at the meeting. Was there something particular that you were?
Well, number 3, I had a question. I mean, I don't quite understand the specifics of of what's gonna be taught.
Well, I would probably
Just have a
just
discussion with her?
ask Gina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, again, this is what was recommended
This,
for these programs
Okay.
now. I mean, it's kind of an update, because.
this is like a state requirement.
This is more of a state requirement, and her answers to it.
Right, so everything in the, kind of the different font with the asterisks and those were, I think, things Gina added.
Right.
Right,
The
but the
regular
lion's share
font
of
was
it.
actually the state rules and laws now for
Right.
this particular program, or the standards, and then her comments are the italicized underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still a work in progress, along with when we have the new staff member
Mm-hmm.
on board.
Okay. So then you have the board meeting next week to discuss field
The bids.
proposals, bids, and then
Hopefully, we'll
you're,
be able to pick a vendor and have that process finished.
okay, and then your regular board meeting is still the third week in June?
Yes.
Okay.
The 15th, I think it is.
Okay.
Or, yeah, I don't know.
Can you tell us who the vendors are, or is that?
5, 12, 19th.
I'm not sure if we can.
I don't know, yeah,
'Cause
I
I
think
don't-
until Andy said
That's
until
usually,
tomorrow at 2, it's not
Right,
public.
because we
You know,
have
not
said
quite.
we
That's
have
okay.
to, but I
Yeah.
don't know who
I'll ask the
is
question
going to, yeah.
next meeting.
Ask it next time.
They know who came to the pre-bid stuff, but we
Right,
don't
and we
know
know
who's
who
gonna
we
turn
sent
them
it
in
out, but
tomorrow.
I don't know who's coming.
Who's gonna
in,
return
so,
them
yeah.
tomorrow.
Well, that's right, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, great. So Kelly shared with us our financial update. So Kelly, if you could walk us through that and see,
Well, there's not a lot to report, really. It's pretty much the same thing, and as Andy said, we gained about $20,000. We're still in the process of reviewing encumbrances and understanding whether we can close more, or if there are expenses that will be applied to those. So, you know, we have variations in those numbers over the course of the month. Our revenue, I think we're showing an instance of not getting what we thought we would in Medicaid, but then we took in more in the other categories, so that's about stable from last month as well.
Just, for reference, I just can't recall annually. Do we normally hit that Medicaid number?
We normally do. There's issues this year with, yeah, I think it's a statewide issue with Medicaid and people not meeting their numbers that they are expecting. So that's not unique to us.
Okay.
And it might even go down more than that. That's an estimate.
And, yeah, the second page gives some detail about, you know, a little bit more detail about, you know, what are the drivers of.
So do you
these
expect that
changes.
number to, the net balance to be about the same by next month, or move higher, lower?
No, it's really hard to say because it all depends on what those encumbrances do.
Okay.
And at this point, it's still just a tad early to understand that fully. There's several things that we need to really analyze. So
And so,
I would hope that that 73 does go up. I won't say it's going to go up tremendously.
and so we would not be making any recommendations to encumber
No,
any
we have
portion
nothing.
thereof.
We are
We're
not
really
putting
going to
No,
try
right.
to,
forward, yes.
because this would be one of the lower
Absolutely it would.
amounts that get returned to the taxpayers, recognizing that, you know, we have a higher maintenance trust amount that was approved at the meeting.
Absolutely.
And, you know, kind of still keeping the retained fund balance and at a level that it's been at, I think probably close to, since we've been doing that. It's not a maximum, but we've been maintaining that level for
Since I've been here.
several years, yeah.
I mean, since I've been BA, I should say.
So-
The lease of those vans postponed because of the fire at that plant?
Yes, we have well, I hate to even say we're going to get them
Have one of
because
these?
there's been so many
Yes, sir.
ups and downs with the roller coaster, but I'm waiting for leasing documents right now, so I believe it's going to happen before the end of the month, or the end of the year.
I didn't recall that when I read that note. I said, oh, what was the reason that it didn't get?
That we don't currently have them?
Yeah.
There was a fire in one of the plants where they are produced.
Oh, I
And
don't recall
it
that,
had-
okay.
Yeah, it has set them back. They thought we'd get them like around, I think it was January initially.
Well, that amount of money would have contributed nicely to,
Yes, because,
75,000?
yes, because now we are having to pay house transportation, what we didn't budget for, so,
Right.
yeah.
Right, great, okay. Okay, well, we will look forward to next month's summary.
So we're having a meeting next month.
But we're not, next month is only June.
Yeah.
It's not yet July. We can have that conversation shortly. I asked Kelly, just not, one more item on the agenda, Raul. Two more items combined into one. I asked Kelly to give us some information on grants and food service, because in looking through previous agendas, I realized we really hadn't talked about food service in a while, and I really honestly couldn't recall a lengthy discussion on grants at any
Not a lot to talk about.
recent point, but it's just, you know.
Yeah, sure.
There were some changes in allocations and things like that that occurred within the past couple weeks, and that kind of
Sure,
made me
no, I
think
know
about it
why
as
that
well,
came
so.
up, absolutely. So what I just passed around, does everybody have it? Okay. These are the grants that the current options that we have on the table for us. And that is the IDA grant, which is a disability-based grant. We use that typically to fund many of our special ed salaries. That could be paras and or teachers. We use it for some program training, if there's a special program that is new to the system, we use that for training. We have in the past purchased special ed software, like the Read 180 program, for instance. I gave you a comparison over the past 3 years. These are 2-year grants, so we have that amount of money for 2 years. We tend to spend most of it in the first year, but that kind of gives you an idea of what the historical allocations have been. Second is a Title II grant, Title IIA grant, and that's primarily focused on professional development. So we typically use that to pay our teachers for curriculum development. We use it for our new hire orientation every year, and then to help supplement some of the workshops and conferences that they attend, especially ones in which we might bring someone here, or we're sending a group of people to a specific one that we want them all to get a specific training. And there again is a historical look at what we've received. And lastly is the Title IV grant. This is a grant that's been around for a really long time. It went away for a while, and now it's back. So, and the best I can really tell you what it's about is for academic achievement. It's kind of associated with that, no student left behind kind of initiative. So what we're going to use it for next year is helping to fund the Project Lead the Way that we're trying to expand into all of our schools, including the elementaries, educational resources, and software, hardware purchases as well. So, and all of these grants have specific requirements in which you can spend it on this or you can't spend it on that or whatever. So we try to juggle those with our general fund and get the best bang for our buck, so to speak. What Darlene had referred to is an additional monies have become available from unspent funds over the course of, I think it's like a 10-year period on the federal level, and the state has been given a really big chunk of money that has been allocated to all of the different districts. I'm sure there's a formula based on how you get that money. What's coming to the co-op is $52,892. There are some special instructions forthcoming on how to use it. I don't know if that means there's something new and exciting that they're going to say you can use this for, but what I anticipate using it, if there's no other instructions, are one of two things, and that would be to perhaps take additional special ed salaries and fund those, and that frees up money in the general fund that would essentially drop to the bottom line and be available for the taxpayers. Another source or another use for it would be potentially if there's a special ed need that comes up in FY20 that we weren't anticipating. We could go to the trust, but depending on the amount of money, we might go to the general fund and try to fund it that way. So this could be that funding source for a program that we're not expecting.
And just so everyone understands, it isn't like the state gives us a check and they make this
no,
available.
No, you have to justify it.
You have to apply, they make it available and you have to substantiate and
Right.
Why you want it-
request
yeah,
it to be
right, right.
reimbursed, so.
Exactly. So that's pretty much the view on grants, federal grants. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, let me pass this one around for food service.
My wife would like that.
So
She was just asking me about that today.
So a couple years ago, I think it's been, I think it was in May, a couple of years
It
ago.
was,
that-
yeah. 2 years ago, I was
realized
looking at
that,
old
yeah.
agendas, like, what have we talked about
Oh.
in May? That's how I found it.
All right, so I was here and I gave you a presentation called Food Service 101. This is more food service update. So I'm going to assume you remembered every single word I gave you last time. So the updates, what we've done since then is we in April of last year, we had a company come in and do what they call a fresh eyes review. We really wanted to take a moment to evaluate ours, for all 3 districts, evaluate our first food service program. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Suggestions, recommendations on how to go forward and move the program. Because as you know, we were not seeing the participation we'd like, and the dollars were very low in terms of sales. So what our expectations were for them is to review our menus, review our meal participation, our marketing efforts, our USDA compliance, and then at that time, the big question was to stay or leave the National Food Service Lunch Program. So we received, it was a great process, a great review. They interviewed many, many people. They deep dive look on all of our processes, and they observed our staff in action. It was a great review. And so they gave us recommendations on all of the things that we asked for. What we've done in FY19, first of all, let me say that we had a lot of staff turnover. We lost both of our head cooks to retirements. So that was kind of a wow moment, like, oh boy, now what do we do? And then we also had Lynn Bill, who used to be our food service director. She decided she wanted to take one of those positions rather than be the director. It's a pretty stressful job. So she, for peace of mind, wanted to move to that position. So she did. And that left the director position open, and we hired Amy Cassidy. I don't know if that's a familiar name to you.
So she came back, right?
She came back, right. Yes. A shock, an unbelievable shock, because she was in Nashua at a higher level position, but she really misses those summers with her kids, and that's really her driving force for doing this. So I can't express to you just how lucky we are to have her here. And the proof of that is, I'm going to skip menu improvements, but go to USDA compliance. It also happened to be that the year that she's coming on is the year that we have a 3-year state inspection, which is a very intensive process that she basically had to start from the moment she walked in to, it happened in April. So they need, a mountain of paper to go through. They come here for a week. It's a very intensive process. And we had very minor corrections that we need to make, with the exception of our wellness policy, which we need to work on. But other than that, she did an unbelievable job. So she is our biggest improvement. And she brought along her own set of menu improvements, and we took recommendations from the Fresh Eyes Review. So our results from just really 1 year under our belt with the recommendations and a brand new director and 2 new head cooks are the results you see on the results page. So I gave you FY10 reimbursable meal counts as comparison, and then FY16 was one of our low moments, and now you can see we're steadily climbing to this year, where we're ahead of last year pretty significantly, and that's only through April. The big one is the breakfast meal counts. I broke those out so you could see that we are really making.
So we're making money now?
Well, I assume we will. I don't have all those
Okay.
numbers yet, and I won't until the end of the year, but it looks very good.
So, and this is just for the co-op.
Less broccoli and
just for
less
the co-op,
cauliflower,
yes.
right?
I would expect that you're seeing the same improvements in meal counts across the district.
Yes.
Because my son is now buying lunch every single day,
Awesome.
which when he only used to buy maybe 3 days a month. So
Wonderful.
we're contributing to that.
Okay, good. Okay, then another results page for you is on the financial update. This is what a chart I gave you last time comparing the years, and you'll see we had our dip. The worst dip was in FY16, and that follows the changes that were made in FY15.
There's no chart.
Oh,
Yeah, we're missing the chart.
on the other side, is that on the second page? Uh-oh.
No.
No.
Okay. No.
No, these are one-page sheets.
That's okay. You can
That's
send it
okay.
to us. You talk us through it.
Tell you what they are. Okay, so FY18, well, let me start with FY16, which you saw last time, which gave us a fund balance of $1,600. I didn't say 16,000, I said 1,600, which in FY10 we had 142,000. So you can see we had a little bit of a drop there. And then in FY17 we went from the 1,600 in fund balance to 16,000. And then in FY18 we're now at 43,000. So we did make a difference there. The
Okay.
revenue in FY16 was $393,000, and in FY18 was $426,000. So I believe that we have started to make significant improvements, and we haven't even really started implementing everything that we want to implement. So the conclusions, do you have that page?
Yes, we have that.
Okay, is that we really should stay in the National School Lunch Program because we are able to improve our participation, and that's really the second thing, that we can improve it. We've seen that. And we will continue to implement the recommendations that the Fresh Eyes people gave to us, and recommendations that Amy brings with all of her vast experience as well. And to that point, we will thrive under her management. And Amy and I will create a 5-year plan next year.
So what are some of the other recommendations, improvements that?
Oh boy, I brought the plan with me. A lot of them were compliance issues. We were not out of compliance with the USDA regulations. We needed some menu boosts, a way to bring some more excitement to the program, which she has started doing that. There were efficiency issues that she, that they gave us recommendations for, on, just creative ways of doing certain things. And, things like having weekly meetings and, there's a lot of detail in here, but it's a lot of little things that add up to something
bigger
big.
changes.
Yeah.
So do we have, I know My School Bucks is the platform for where I would say probably 99% of the people who are paying into lunch accounts. It's a way to pay into your child's lunch account, and then they have a meal card, and you either, I don't know if you swipe it or put in their code or whatever. Do we have a significant amount of unpaid balances across the district?
Well, that continues to be an issue because now, there used to be the time where you could give the child who isn't able to pay the cheese sandwich, and that was it. Now we are required to give them the meal
of the day.
That is the meal count meal. And so we are seeing those balances go up. But we're also seeing some donations come in to help cover that. And we're actually going to next year make that much more of a formal program.
I was going to say, I'm sure you've heard of the program in Nashua.
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, there is a student-led initiative with the students at Nashua South I'm not sure exactly how their meal plan worked and how what you could and couldn't serve students who didn't have money for their meals. But I think the students just became aware of kids just not being able to eat lunch. So they started a fundraising initiative and do all kinds of fundraising and to make money available for kids who can't afford lunches. Right. So they're actually going to going out to try to find corporate sponsors and things like that. So I know one of the students who's involved with that. But you could probably, it was in the paper, and I could get you some more information. But again, that was a student-led initiative that's kind of, they're hoping to grow, and they're going to move it up to Nashua North next year as well. So I just thought it was a unique way that the kids recognized a problem and really kind of stepped up and.
Sure, and we may be able to get our students involved in something like that too, because I'm sure it's a problem that's not really a known problem.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, those negative balances are part of it, our real need. Like maybe they don't qualify under the free and reduced, but they just don't have the dollars to purchase the lunches. However, there are others that can and just don't pay. So there's two different groups of people there that represent those negative balances.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions?
I thought I had one more, but I can't remember what it is. Can't remember it, so. Okay. Thank you. I think May can be Food Service Update Month, as June is typically our facilities overview month.
Yes.
But I think that covers our agenda items. Does anyone have any other kind of questions or concerns, issues you'd like to bring to Kelly's attention? Seeing none, we can move on to announcements. Thank you, Kelly, I appreciate all the detail and effort that went into that. I'll get you that contact
Yeah, that'd be
information.
great.
So from announcements, I'll just reiterate that next week, the school board has a meeting. Then they have another one on, the governing board, I think, is meeting as well that night. And then your next meeting is also the third Wednesday of June. Our next planned meeting would be the fourth Thursday of June. And that's typically the one where we have the facilities overview. Andy gave us an overview of FY21 at tonight's meeting, so I think we're good on that score. And I think the next topic to discuss is our summer schedule, where normally we are off for the month of July and then reconvene at the end of August. So we really do have the whole summer off, because that fourth week in August is the 22nd. We could even jump to the fifth week if everyone wanted an extra week, and we would go back around the 29th, which is near when the kids go back to school. So I just hate to wait until the end of September. I just feel like we're kind of like, I feel like that's just a little too late just to kind of get started if we were to skip both July and August. But we've skipped July with no, impact over the last few years, so I would take a recommendation to skip the July meeting.
I would move that we skip the July meeting.
I second.
There we go. All those in favor? I don't think
Aye.
anyone needs any discussion on it. Great.
I'd also move that we move the August meeting to the 29th.
All right, let's do that as well.
I
Do you need
second.
I don't think, do we need an official motion? We can just move.
No,
the meeting.
just
We'll
schedule it.
we'll just schedule it
Yeah.
for the 29th.
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, great.
I withdraw my second.
And I think that's about it for now. Does anyone have any other issues, questions, or concerns they'd like to bring up?
Two things. I'll repeat again. I would like to see at some point a list of the classes that are offered
Oh.
and an idea of the relative attendance of them. But mostly I'm just looking get some insight into what it is that we're offering for the co-op.
Oh, okay, 'cause
Yep,
I
because
thought
you've sent me those for the
Brookline.
elementary schools. I
didn't realize you were
appreciate that.
looking for both. Okay, gotcha.
I don't know that I'd mentioned it to you. I'd mentioned it to Darlene
think, yeah.
earlier, so I'd
Okay.
like to see that.
Okay, thanks,
And the
Brian.
other thing is, it would be nice if at some point we could have a tour of the two buildings, the middle school and the high school. Summertime might be good for that when there's no kids here and that sort of thing, just to see the whole facilities and see everything.
Does
And
like,
I'm happy to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can do that.
all right, good, because I kind of feel, I don't know what the principal's hours are like in the summer. Maybe we can attach it to our June meeting. We'll be, everyone will be, out by then, and
Yeah.
maybe we
that's-
could do,
yeah,
we could do
we
one
could
of them
that.
maybe, and
Yeah, one of them
Yep.
then.
and then one in August or something
in
like that.
August,
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be like a 5:30 start,
Mm-hmm.
just like we did tonight,
Yep.
with lots of participation.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then we should have pizza or something.
Sure, we can do that too. So that would be, is it June 27th?
Do you want to do
we gotta
the
talk
middle
about a
school
pizza
or
budget.
the high school?
We could do the high school in June
Yeah, pizza budget.
and the middle school in
So we'll
August,
plan on that at 5:30 then?
5:30.
All right.
Okay,
I know we've been talking about various house bills and stuff
Oh,
over the
yeah.
years. So in our June Brookline meeting, we are having our reps a couple of our reps show up, and we're going to talk to them about some of the bills.
when is that meeting? Is that the
It's a
Tuesday
special-
before or-
No,
no,
it's
it's a
a
special?
different day than normal. Is it the 12th? No, it's earlier in the month, because we're not having a meeting this month. I don't think it's the 5th, so I think it's the 12th.
It's a Wednesday, right?
Yes, it's a
Yeah,
Wednesday.
just the 12th.
Okay, so Wednesday, the 12th in Brookline. 6:12. Thank you.
And just from the school board, graduation is June 8th.
Oh,
If anybody
great.
wants at 10 a.m. It's hard to believe it
Excellent.
went that's very fast this year.
It really did. And last day of school is,
The 15th.
no, that's a Saturday, the 14th,
No.
the 19th?
Yes, the 19th.
The 19th,
Yes, and
okay.
that's a Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it
Okay,
is.
absolutely, it's the 19th then.
Okay, great. Anything else? I'll take a motion to adjourn at 8:24 PM.
I make a motion to adjourn
By
at
Raul,
8:24.
seconded by Lauren. All those in favor?
Right.
Excellent, thank you.
And the process was excellent.